Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Baal Shem Kolel and Spot Israel. So today we're going to be speaking about the last Sikha of the Rebbe, which is this week's Parashat Vayakel. And in fact, the Rebbe, this Sikha, if you wanted to categorize, they have like Dvar Malchus and they kind of have a heading. So they categorize it as Achdus, it's unity. It's an amazing Sikha because it really describes how to have unity. It's an amazing, unbelievable talk. But we pretty much went through most of the talk. We discussed the idea that everybody has to have an identity, that I'm a servant of Hashem, and everybody's complementary in this world. It's becoming very, very clear to me that this is really reality, that we are basically, everything in the universe is pulsating. Everything is made in a way of Ratzei V'Shuv. So the physical literally pulsates into existence. And so everything is just like a heartbeat. Everything is literally, all living things have heartbeats. And even physical things have literally pulses. You can see it in Kirlian photography that everything's pulsating energy. So the idea is that why would one being make all these billions and trillions and all these different beings? So this has to be something, the drive for ego, the Roman thing was we came, we saw, we conquered. That drive is not a normal, healthy drive because it just, in fact, as we said the other day, it often doesn't come from positive self-image. It actually comes from negative self-image because a person who feels good about himself, I have this, he unfortunately passed away, but he learned with me for many years. So he once had a company, there were bricklayers. So one of the guys, a tough guy to lay bricks is not simple. So he came over to the boss. He says, I'll bet you $1 that I could carry, whatever, 10 bricks down the road faster than you. The boss took out $1. He says, you it. Right? So the person that needs to show that he's better than the other, that's already coming from a place where he actually thinks that he's worse than the other. The person that's healthy, in a certain sense, the American mentality where all people are created equal, these are very, very valuable mentalities because often in life there's this kind of bullying, and then people feel erroneously that they're not, something's wrong with them, and they have to prove that they're better. And the whole thing is a Baba Maisa from beginning to end. You're not worse, he's not better. The whole thing of being better doesn't make any sense. We're all here together to do a higher purpose, like an army, and people are trying to show. I don't know if I don't know. People are trying to show how each one is better than the other. It doesn't make any sense. We're all here together to win the war. And we just had a beautiful thought that we discussed, which is this idea that life is a war. And it's very, very interesting because you were just talking about health, that the concept of how the Abishter made the world is, we of course we don't agree with evolution, but there is a certain truth to the idea that the negative forces a better positive. Because if, and the Rebbe says this, that why do we have to have a Yetzer Hara? Who needs a Yetzer Hara? We can have a Yetzer Tov. Hello, hello. We need a Yetzer Hara because if you didn't have something that you were fighting against, if you didn't have something that you were pushing against, you would never go forward. Right? And this famous example that I really like to give, and that is that, um, hey boss, how are you? Welcome, welcome. And that is that, maybe we take a break for a minute. Okay, should we continue? So we're discussing this idea that very interesting that we find. I mean, obviously God made a physical and a spiritual reality. We find that life is made in a way of a battle. War is a bad word, but a battle is a better word. Now it's very interesting. Why did Hashem make the world in such a way that things have to be a battle? So it's a very fascinating talk of the Rebbe. Everything that happens in the world happens on two dimensions. It happens on a physical dimension. It also happens on a spiritual dimension. In other words, if you're eating food, there's a physical reason and a spiritual reason. And everything gives us a lesson in life. So when they took the space shuttle up, we all know the picture of the space shuttle. So you got a little bit like this, right? You got your three rockets, and you have your outer layer, and then you've got your middle, and the big one is like really, really big, and then it's less big, less big. Why? Because they had an issue of how do you get this massive thing into space. So they came up with a really simple and good solution, which is 3 separate rockets. Because the first rocket is the main gravitational pull on Earth, and that is a very, very powerful pull. So you got to get out of the gravitational pull of Earth. The higher you go, the less the gravitational pull. So now you need a little less, and then once you just need to push yourself into outer space, and outer space there's no gravity. So the same thing is we begin with a very big. So we have a need to get first the soul. I was just learning from the Baal Shem Tov today that basically if a person kind of gets rid of the desires of the body, the soul can shine. These are two opposite things. If a person is into, like the Rebbe says from Kabbalah, that tukfa de gufa hulsha de nishmasa, that the strength of the body is the weakness of the soul. Why? Because it doesn't mean not to have a healthy body, but if a person, let's say they're a foodie, they're into food or something. So if that's what you're into, so you're taking away from the desire of the soul. The soul wants to be into God and goodness and kindness and other things. So the point is that the powerful drive of the body has to be weakened. But ironically, the powerful drive of the body also is a motivation for the soul. Why? Because eventually the soul is starving. The soul says, I need something more than what's going on here. And so this is why the Yetzer Hara is called very good, because the Yetzer Hara is something that you have to fight against. And this fight drives you in the right. Why are we all here around this table? And millions and hundreds of millions of people became spiritual because we had the Yetzer Hara, we had the physical, but we realized it wasn't meaningful, it wasn't satisfactory. But the thing is, once you hit that level, then there's a smaller Yetzer Hara. And then there's a smaller Yetzer Hara. You begin to get to the point where you got the Yetzer Hara in a box. Now, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have a Yetzer Hara, but you begin to understand the Yetzer Hara. You begin to understand the body. You begin to really understand what you're meant to be doing, what you're not. In fact, one of the very important things in life is knowing what thought comes from the Yetzer Tov and what thought comes from the Yetzer Hara. It's very, very complicated. It's not a simple thing. But it's very important because if you don't know which of your thoughts is the Yetzer Hara, which of your thoughts is the Yetzer Tov, you got a big problem. I remember once my father, who's a very great scholar and is also a very special person, so he once told me, Zevi, you have to know yourself. Right? So I spent like years just listening to my own voice, the voice in your own head. You have to know yourself, because unless you know yourself, you don't know who's talking, what's talking. And sometimes also people can become aware of their emotions. You're feeling an emotion, so now you know why you're feeling what you're feeling. Otherwise, the emotion just presents itself. The person wants to do something, they don't even know why they're doing it. So then how do they know what's good and what's bad? So a person has to have clarity. They have to know their emotions. They have to be able to tell. And this is what we're doing in life. And so this is a very interesting principle that Hashem made everything in a way of a battle. We were talking before about health. Many people are not aware of this, but the health really works also in a way of a battle. First of all, it's interesting because a little child picks up everything it tastes it. And in fact, if you protect the child too much, and this is one of the big problems in the West, where we have a lot of prosperity, is we protect people too much. And if you're too protective, it ends up happening, you don't develop a strong immune system. Because how does the immune system itself, the very most important, one of the most important systems of fighting disease, if not the most important, it knows from the memory and from the conquering. So the way Hashem made the world is we go through challenges, and as we conquer, in fact, we learned from the Baal Shem Tov the other day that if you have a difficulty and you pray for it and you're helped, you don't really have that difficulty. You've gone through that challenge. In other words, in life, we're meant to go through certain challenges. Those challenges are meant to be our teachers. They teach us how to behave in various circumstances and what to do. And then it's like we gave the example of a phone. You phone, the body, then you've downloaded an app. You know how to deal with this, you know how to deal with that, And that's another reason why kind of the American or kind of the liberal ideology of just let people do what they want is a ridiculous ideology, because it's the worst thing that a person can do. Do what you want, because then you're going to become more and more addicted to trying to get what you want, more and more frustrated, and what you want is 90% of the time not good for you. It's on the contrary. Do what Hashem says, because what Hashem says is good, and Hashem made the battle. Hashem made you want just to do whatever you want, and He comes around and He tells you what to do, and this battle is the way that we learn through life. And of course, the whole universe, the whole reality is the Torah. Shri Freeman calls the world is God's classroom without walls. Hashem is always teaching us, whether you like it or not. Every single experience is your teacher. And this is, of course, the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, that Hashem is always communicating with us. And it's a very real thing, because the real reality that a person experiences is not the physical reality. We're not physical beings. We're emotional beings. We're spiritual beings. We're intellectual beings. We're not physical beings. And so, therefore, what we're experiencing are these sensations and these memories and these emotions and these frustrations, whether even spiritual frustrations. And these are the things that cause us to go forward. So when we think about health, we have to realize that, and this is something very interesting, the largest study in history was called the China study. And they had American doctors that went to check out this China study. There was a Chinese premier. And unfortunately, he got Yanamachla, and he has power. He's a dictator, and he's got 1 billion people. So he ordered a study, 850 million people. So it's an extraordinary study. No, a study with 30 people is not a very good study. A study with 1 million, 100 million, 850 million, these are very, very good studies. And basically, the bottom line of the whole study was you have to, from their perspective, get rid of all animal protein or animal food in your diet, because what he says, the doctor that, and he's I think he's from, where was he from? I forget the name of the university, but he's top guy. He says what happens in the body's always producing little cancer cells. But the thing is that the body's always killing them. Now, what happens is that the healthier your food, it's like a healthy army. If you train your army well, it'll be a good army. If you don't train them well, we just saw what happened with Russia going into Ukraine. Russia has a $500 million budget. Ukraine has a 500 billion. Ukraine has 500 million. But the army was a puppet army, because the weapons weren't good and the soldier, whatever, the whole thing was a joke. And so the puppet army is not going to get you anywhere, even with the best weapons and or whatever. With the best soldiers, you need the right weapons, you need the right stuff. And so this is why the body always needs healthy food. And what we all know is that we always have bacteria coming in. We're always killing bacteria. The body is in a constant state of war. And the irony is that that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Why? Because the more you fight, the better you are at getting rid of the enemy. And so the way Hashem made the world is we're constantly improving. The enemy is constantly making us better. In fact, Israel, in a way, I really believe is the safest country in the world. Why? Because it had to deal with terrorism for so long. There were so many sophisticated measures, even the Iron Dome, this, that. Even a great army like America may be more vulnerable to certain types of terrorism than Israel is, because Israel's already got the experience, right? Ein chacham kabal and nobody's as smart as somebody with experience. And so this is ties into, it's literally kind of one of the most important messages of the Rebbe. And it's a message that a lot of people don't know. It's very, very interesting. And it's the message of tzedakah. So what is the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael? The mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, the Rebbe says, to help every Jew, no matter who he is or where he is. Every Jew and Jewish woman, right? A person can't be biased when it comes to helping. It applies to women as well as men. Our job is to be there to help. Now, the final paragraph, we sort of mentioned it, but the final paragraph the Rebbe relates to the giving of tzedakah. And he says there are 3 levels of giving tzedakah. In fact, the Rebbe speaks about this elsewhere as well. One level is 10%. The other level is 20%. And the other level is everything. So, in other words, a Jew has to be a person where the whole drive in life is helping other people. This is our drive. And it's an interesting thing, because generally Judaism, when we think about Judaism, we usually think about a mitzvah. You just think about how it relates to man and God. But that's not what Judaism is really about. But we know that the whole Judaism is that it says that that which you don't want someone else to do to you, don't do to them. Rabbi Kiva says, love your fellow Jew as yourself. This is a great principle of the Torah. So in other words, we see this very clearly by the Lubavitcher Rebbe's, starting really from the Baal Shem Tov, a new style. And in fact, we see it by Avraham Avinu as well. We see it by Moshe. I guess we see it by all the great leaders. But it's a different type of Judaism than the average person thinks, because the average person can only assume, and they make from their assumptions a reality. But when you look at the actual text and the actual things that what Judaism tells us to do, it's not an assumption anymore. Now it's an absolute fact. That is that Of course, it's important to learn, and of course, it's important to daven. But the question is, what's more important? If you have an opportunity to help a fellow Jew or to learn and daven, what's more important is to help the fellow Jew. And that's what we call a mitzvah, a mitzvah that will get lost. Something that is very important. That's why it's so important to be connected to the Rebbe, because the Rebbe knows all the mitzvahs, he knows all the Torah, and the Rebbe can tell us what is important. If the person doesn't have a Rebbe, they can very easily swayed. Cults develop. Some guy, actually, it's very, very interesting. When the Alter Rebbe was arrested, there were questions about Chassidus. So one of the things of Chassidus is that they daven for a long time. They take davening very serious. So they asked him, what's the story? So he says, that used to be the typical way in Judaism. I didn't know this. In fact, he said it's in Gemara, Chassidim in the early Siddur, they would meditate for an hour before and after davening. They daven for an hour. In other words, they were davening for 9 hours a day. It's a pretty serious practice. So he said, but what happened was that you had Rosh Yeshivas, you had, Yeshiva, whatever, Torah scholars, but they weren't so into davening. They were more into learning. That was kind of their thing. And so they kind of denigrated a little bit the whole davening process because they weren't so in the mood, and they became more into the learning, and they made learning the main thing. But the truth of the matter is that we know that it says, Loi hamedrash ikar el hamaisa, right? Learning is not the main thing. Action is the main thing. Learning is meant to lead to action. So what does it really boil down to? Really, Yiddishkeit boils down to, as the Rebbe, I'm quoting from the Rebbe, it's not my invention, he says Judaism boils down to goodness and kindness. It's an interesting religion, a religion of goodness and kindness. And so this, in a way, if you have a core, if you have a core of something, that means everything else feeds the core. Right? Hillel actually said, that which is hateful to you, don't do to someone else. And the rest is the explanation of this. So you can ask a question, how is, davening to Hashem an explanation of Avas Yisrael? And so this is what the Alter Rebbe says in chapter 32 of Tanya, is that they go hand in hand. Why? Because why do you have love for your fellow man? Because you understand that you're really a divine soul. Because you understand you're a divine soul, and he also is a divine soul, so therefore you extend love. You can only extend love to something that's similar. I don't love rats. I don't love cats so much. I only extend my love to people. People are similar to me, so I extend love to similarity. So if I'm extending my love to that which is similar to me, I have to have something that's similar. So the whole idea of prayer, and in general all the mitzvahs, people don't know this, but it's very interesting. The Rambam speaks about that the mitzvahs are letzaref. I don't know if he's the one, maybe somebody else is. Mitzvahs are letzaref hasabrius, to refine us. So the question is, how does a mitzvah refine you? Okay, not eating that pork refines you. How does it refine me? It's very, very, very profound. The Rebbe Rashab says this. Rebbe Rashab says that a storekeeper doesn't really care what it is that you buy in his store, right? If I own a store, I really don't care if I'm selling you pickles or I'm selling you cheese. It doesn't make a difference to me. What does he care about? He cares about what is the actual profit that he's going to make, right? He doesn't even care about turnover. If he's normal, he cares about one thing. What's the bottom line? What's the profit? The Rebbe Shab says that every mitzvah has the same concept. There's a profit in the mitzvah. What is the profit? The profit is it makes you a little humble. What's the humility? The humility is that the nature, the Rebbe says about children, the nature of a child is he wants just to get his way. He doesn't want somebody to tell him what to do. He just wants to get his way. The Yid has a Yetzer Hara. We all have an ego. And the ego doesn't want even God himself to tell you what to do. You just want to get, at least the brain, obviously, and the soul wants to listen to God. But the ego wants to just be the master. He doesn't want anyone to tell it what to do. So every time we eat, and we eat has to be kosher. Every time we go to daven. The irony is 90% of us don't even understand what we're saying. Every time, and that's the secret of the mitzvah. The mitzvah is not what you understand, what you don't understand. Because if you do understand it, you receive a pleasure from it. And if you receive a pleasure, then you want to do it. And if you want to do it, the ego is invested. It has to be exactly the way it is, that you don't understand the mitzvah. Because in such a way, what ends up happening is you actually get to the point where every single mitzvah has that same quality. It makes you a little bit humble. And you see it very clearly with religious Jews. There's a certain humility, a certain decency that's there because they have this obligation on them. They have to do it, right? There's a healthy thing. I even see it with people from Russia. Russians are brought up in a bit of a harsh society. When you're in nursery school, there's 2 hours of rest, and God help you if you get out of that little cot. They learn how to behave, right? There's no such thing as ADD in Russia. Doesn't exist. They'll make you got to learn. You learn. It's like a military, but there's something to a soldier that he has a certain discipline, right? There's a certain discipline that they do have. So in Yiddishkeit, obviously you could crush someone through too much discipline. So it's a balance. You don't want to over discipline people. That's not a good thing either. But in Yiddishkeit, we have the right, perfect balance. But we have to remember that the main thing of this whole thing, what is Hashem ultimately looking for? He's looking for chesed. He's looking for ahavas. So the person really has to try hard to remember what is the ikr, what is the main thing. It's interesting because remember when I read the Sikha, I've read it many, many times, but one of the times I kind of got the feeling that the Rebbe's last message to us, and somebody, a big knowledgeable person, the Rebbe's last prayer told me, the Rebbe's last message to us was to be wealthy. Why? Because wealthy is very important. Because a person who has more can give more. It's very simple. The Rebbe speaks about 3 reasons to be wealthy. One is to give tzedakah, the other is to do mitzvahs in a beautiful way, and the third is to actually have peace of mind, right? That's a good thing that wealth can bring. So it's very important to try to be wealthy and to do whatever a person can, obviously in a Torah-dic way. But again, the key thing here is this, and this is kind of the Mashiach reality that a person has to kind of flip their minds around. We all know the famous story that the sages saw that idolatry was too much. The first base of Mitzvah was destroyed because of idolatry. There was some kind of this great taiva, very famous story, that one of the Tanoim or Amiroim said, tomorrow we're going to give a lecture about Menashe, our friend Menashe. So Menashe was one of the kings of Israel that introduced, he was the son of Cheskio. He introduced, was it Cheskio or was it, no, who was that famous king, the very holy king? Hashem wanted to make a Mashiach. Bikesh Hashem Lasois. Cheskio, thank you. So Hashem wanted to make Cheskio a Mashiach, and eventually he didn't make a Mashiach for some reason. He didn't say Shira to Hashem. Interesting, the Rebbe did bring that down. He said Shira to Hashem, basically praised Hashem after the Gulf War, the miracles that Hashem did, and He's constantly doing for us. We're like one sheep literally surrounded by 70 wolves, and Hashem is always protecting us. The wolves are falling away. So the bottom line of life is that there was a Yetzer Hara. And this Yetzer Hara was so strong that the rabbi said, we got to deal with this Yetzer Hara. It's too strong. The Jews can't overcome this desire for idolatry. And he said, we're going to talk about Menashe, our friend Menashe. And that night Menashe came to him in a dream. And he asked him a question in halacha. And it turns out that Menashe knew Torah better than this great rabbi. So he said to him, so why did you worship idols? He said, if you were my generation, you would have, I forgot the exact wording, it was something like you would have lifted the hem of my cloak to run quicker. It was like people get insane, whether it's a lust or drugs, they become insane. So they took this idolatrous desire and they put it into money. It's true, people can be very nice to each other. Once it comes to money, they can lose their mind. So, and Al Rebbe said, by the way, he's not sure if it was a benefit. He's not sure if it was a good trade-off. Now, again, that's not to say money is the root of all evil, because money is the root of all blessings. It's a good thing to have. It's a good thing to be able to give. Money is a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful, beautiful mitzvah. But what it is to say is that it makes a difference why you want the money. What is the reason for the money? There's a wealthy man here, in fact, my landlord, he said something interesting. He says, to me, owning things doesn't mean anything. It's like he has many different properties. I put it in my kids' names. I don't need to own things. Whatever that's functionality. I need a house to live in. I don't need to own it. So in other words, so what is the Mashiach? And how do we really bring Mashiach? We have to be Masakin. We have to get rid of this klippa of the wrong attitude. Because everything in the world is about attitude. It's all could be used for the good, but it's the right attitude. And what is the right attitude towards everything, particularly money, which is what is the mitzvah that can be done with this thing? A yid has to see himself as a mitzvah machine. What is the mitzvah that I can do? And once we get into this mentality that I am a mitzvah machine, I'm here to do more mitzvahs, and like the Rebbe was always adding more, and this is my role, I'm a mitzvah machine. And then everything that could be used for the good. And then you see this very clearly in the Rebbe's mentality. Most people, most religions, certainly ethical religions, will make a very powerful distinction between right and wrong. And they'll categorize some things, right? Chabad were kind of much more, if you want to call it, open. So here we have a smartphone, but it has a filter. In other words, the phone itself is not an impure thing. It can be used, and it is used for many good things. You're taking a video, and other people will see, other people will be inspired. So the world itself inherently is not a bad place. Inherently, it's actually an amazing place. But it can be used for selfish reasons or used for selfless reasons. It could be used for the good or it could be used for the bad. And practically every single thing God made can be used for one or the other. And so the job of the individual, and that's really what Mashiach is, where everything is redeemed. When I use myself for good things, when I use my life for good things, right? And this is really what it's about, because the world won't disintegrate, the world won't disappear. We're still going to be here. Yeah, I have a little kind of blog, and I wrote, it's an interesting thing. What is permanent? If you actually think about what's permanent in life, you get a very clarity of reality, because even spiritually, you could be not in the real reality, what is really going on. And it's a problem, because we know that if you have too much rotza, you're too much trying to leave this, nirvana, which other religions have, you're missing the boat. So when you know what is infinite, what is always going to be, you have great clarity. So first thing that's always going to be is Hashem. He's the source of everything. The second thing that's always going to be is Hashem's desire, because it's His desire that makes everything. The third thing that's always going to be is what He desires. What does He desire? He desires for us to have a certain sense of independence. So that's why we exist in a time-space, in a universe, a time-space reality. And then He desires that we should always grow. And in order to grow, there always has to be some kind of a challenge. And even if you're challenging yourself, there has to be a challenge. So now we know that four things are always going to be. And this, I believe, 100% is the reality of all realities. Number one, there's Hashem. Number two, there's His desire. What is His desire? It's for us and for our growth. And number four, there's always going to be growth in this dimension, in a time-space reality. And once you can appreciate that you're not going anywhere. In fact, everybody's coming over here. The souls are coming back. There is no escape from this dimension. Some people are hoping that after 100 years they're going to go away, they're going to be nirvana, and that's it. Happily ever after, and I don't have to deal with anybody else ever again. It's not going to happen. You're going to still have to deal with yourself, and you're still going to have to deal with God, and still deal with other people. And that's a good thing, because that, as like you said at the beginning, the more we exercise, the more we learn the more we're in this world, the better we become at dealing. And just a very simple thing, when a child is young, it's a very important stage. A child is very much in the world of fantasy, certainly men. Jerry Seinfeld says when boys read comics, they're looking at their job options. So it's actually a very big problem, because boys can't distinguish between fantasy and reality. So it's a very big problem. All the movies, they literally can't distinguish. They think it's real. I remember seeing this. It's a comedy, but this little kid, I don't know, she was like a 4-year-old girl, and she was watching like Sesame Street. And so they have the Cookie Monster or something, and somebody's chasing the Cookie Monster, and then the Cookie Monster comes into the living room, and the child didn't even think for a second that this was strange. The Cookie Monster says, "Quick, hide me!" And she goes to hide it. To her, what she was seeing was 100% real. The fact that the Cookie Monster came into the room was 100% real, and that's why the Rebbe says he was against the whole idea of making an unreality for kids. It's very unhealthy. A child needs to know what's reality. So the point is like this, that in the end of the day, this world is an amazing place. It's really a beautiful place. And children, when they grow up, they're in a kind of a fantasy stage. And it's not a bad thing. I saw this thing, I don't know if it's true, a study that men basically fantasize, probably older, about a vacation, and women about getting married. Little girls, and you see it clearly, have daughters, and they'll watch for hours wedding videos. To a girl, the wedding is the greatest day of her life, and they'll for years and years they'll be watching. It's a very big, important thing in her life. So, in other words, and Freud actually says that a child wants to be big. He's little and he sees his parents, he wants to be big. And they live in a certain fantasy, and that fantasy is a good thing. Because to fantasize, that's what we would call chachma, koyach, the potential. You're busy imagining. But the thing is, imagination isn't reality. You don't plant a field through imagine. You can imagine from today to tomorrow the best crop in the world. If you don't plant that field, you're not going to have a crop. So the opposite of fantasy is actually difficult. And that's the place that people don't like to get into. And that is reality, hard work. The details, which is Bina. Bina is the subdivision. But, and here's the but, the Hashem made a world, a very perfect world, that you have times of spiritual times. In a way, spirituality is like the fantasy. You're going into a perfect world. I love Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. I think about all the good things that I'm going to do. It's wonderful. I love it. It's like a whole beautiful, I don't want to call it a fantasy. Maybe I do some of it, but I'm saying it's a nice space to be in because you're like imagining everything you're going to do. But to actually get down and do it, that's not such a simple thing. But eventually what occurs in a person's life is that the person begins to become good at doing things. They become good at the system because you have to have times of inspiration and you also have to have times of perspiration. You have to have both. And many people, they're too inundated with stress, and unfortunately they don't have the Jewish system of the day a week. The Romans called the Jews lazy because we didn't work 7 days a week. But actually the Romans were stupid. Because you need a day of rest, you need a day where you recharge your batteries, etc. And in fact, they have studies that if you take 20 minutes out of every hour, or maybe even the opposite, 40 minutes, you're much more productive. Because a person needs a sense of rest, and the brain can't always be working. A psychiatrist once told me the brain is a glucose hog. 25% of our glucose goes to the brain. That's why when people think, they get tired. That's why a lot of people don't like to think. In fact, they've smart people. Not necessarily smarter, they just think quicker. So it takes them less energy to think, so they don't mind thinking. But it's not like the other person can't think, right? Famous thing that a woman might come up with amazing arguments for and the Talmud says, how will she come up with these sophisticated arguments that great judges are thinking? When something matters to you, you figure it out. You think. So the bottom line is that we become good at what we do. We become good at chesed. We become good, and you see it very clearly. The older people get, the better they are, and in relationships and how to get along with people. The more nuanced, the ego is less, and so the better and better we get. This is like Mashiach times. We all become more clear, and that's what it says. That the older we get, as long as we're studying Torah, the more certain we are. Psychologists say that every 7 years, people change their entire worldview. Except if you're a Yid or you have a true worldview. Every 7 years, you're more certain that what you're saying is true. It's not less certain. You don't have to change everything. You're more certain. So this is the bottom line. That Baruch Hashem, we have clarity, and we're here to serve Hashem. We're here to help others, to do it b'simcha, because everything we're doing is evoking Hashem. It's getting Hashem to do it as well. Everything we're doing is not only I'm doing it, like dropping a pebble in the ocean. I'm making a ripple effect throughout the universe. When we can think of our lives in this way, that everything I do is literally rippling throughout all the universes, and it's true. As it says in Tanya, whenever a person has a skafia, that's why the Rebbe's whole thing is about doing more, pushing yourself extra. Because if you're just habitual, then it's not so great. But we have to push ourselves to go higher and higher.
You mentioned that one has to know who's talking to him, whether it's Yetzirah or Yetzirah talking.
Yeah.
How to distinguish.
Right. So the question is, how do we actually know which voice is in your head? So I would say with myself, first of all, you have to know your own head. The person has to have self-awareness. Self-awareness. I encourage people to look at my book, KabbalahLove.org. I write a little bit about self-awareness.
Which book?
KabbalahLove.org. I also have a book, it's on the Amazon, called Self-Awareness. Self-awareness is very, very important. Because a person doesn't know themselves, right? I mentioned the story that my father once told me that you have to know yourself. And I literally spent years just watching my own thoughts. So a person that can watch their own thoughts can change their thoughts. They know what to think. But it's not even enough, I think, to know your own thoughts. You also have to know, I don't know, I mean, I once had an interesting experience where I think some people, we're all like more or less in tune with our emotions, right? So Sometimes people are very cognitive. They don't even know what they're feeling. They're thinking various different things, but the emotions are really in the heart. So Hashem once kind of did a little, I don't know if it's a miracle. I think many people are kind of more in tune with their emotions, but I kind of like, I could see, like opened up the heart. So I could see whatever emotion I'm feeling for the good or the bad. That's a very, very powerful thing. Why? Because I know why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. If I'm angry or if I'm happy, if I'm sad. So there's clarity of the emotion. Once you know what the emotion is, it's not so hard to say, do I want this emotion, do I not? So I think that, I mean, I don't really know the answer to the question. The only thing that I can think of is that a person actually has to ask themselves, what do I want? Right? Now, and then bring it out into the open. Because many times people want things, but they don't know what they want. Their desires are driving them. They're not aware of their desires. If you actually ask yourself, okay, what do I want to know every single thing that you want, right? Let's say I'm talking to my son, Zevi, tell me everything that you want. So suddenly the things are going to come up because the brain basically responds, at least I find this with myself, the brain will respond to what you're asking. So I want this, I want this. Then you can ask yourself, okay, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Should I want it? Should I not want it? I mentioned the other day an exercise which I kind of practiced, which is very, very powerful. That actually, what is it that drives a person is tainos, pleasure. So ask yourself, what gives me pleasure? And then say, now, if you want to get rid of that pleasure, because that's a driving force, whether you like it or not, then you can actually say to yourself, you could imagine, okay, if I do that, I'm going to burn, God forbid, in hell. I don't want to burn in hell, so then you take away, and that's actually what hell is. That you had some pleasure from something, and they want to get rid of. It's not punishment. So you can't come to Hashem. What is Hashem? It's called Nenim Ziv Ashchina. You're having joy from Chassidus. But let's say your joy is in steaks. So how are you going to enjoy Chassidus if you enjoy steaks? So the idea is that let's say you have 10 degrees of enjoyment in a steak. So what they do is they put you in a 10-degree furnace for 2 months, let's say. And you're like, the last thing in the world that you ever want to see is a steak. Why do you want a steak? Because it gives you a pleasure. But what if the steak gave you a pain? So the stimuli changed. In fact, there's a drug that sometimes can be, that a judge will order for alcoholics, that once the person takes this drug or they take alcohol, they throw up. It's a terrible experience. Very simply, you want to get people off drugs, give them some kind of a chemical that if they ever take the drug or whatever, they'll be in shock for 3 days. You know what I mean? They won't take another drug because it's the stimulus. So the same stimulus can switch around. So a person has to have the ability in their own head. The Alter Rebbe brings this down. Let's say a person has a lust for women. Imagine a woman filled with excrement. They can turn it around to something which is now, I don't want that thing. You go from want to don't want. But the reverse is also true. You have to ask, so what should I be taking pleasure in? Okay, I like that. If I do that, I'm going to get 50,000 steaks in Shemayim, let's say, whatever. So you have to be able to, a person has to be able to control their emotions, control their desires, because the desires are controlling them. The only thing that a human being can really do is either they can basically self-discipline themselves, say this is right, this is wrong, but really it's deeper than that. You have to be able to know what your desires are. You have to be able to control your desires. And if a person can do that, then they can, or even create their desires. You create it by saying, this will be good for me, or you get rid of it, this will be bad for me. But you actually have to be able to, like, make it happen. And when I did this exercise, I had a very powerful thing. I don't even remember what it was, but it was something that I realized, a desire that I had. I asked myself this question, what gives me pleasure? It was something that I had a pleasure in, which was not worth having. And I was able to get rid of it. And literally, I don't even remember it, but it was like with me for 20 years. And boom, I was able to get rid of it. Because I went to the core of what's driving us. So I don't really know the answer of how do we really distinguish. I would say probably the best way, and this is what the Rebbe says, you have to go to Mashpia, because it's very, very hard for an individual to have awareness of which thought is coming from the Yetzer Hara, which the Yetzer Hara. It's almost impossible, because the Yetzer Hara is like the judge, right? As soon as you take a bribe, you're biased. You don't even know. You don't even know, because it says, your thoughts are actually outcomes of your desires. People think that they're thinking, but really they're desiring to think those thoughts because those thoughts are leading to conclusions of their desires. And so therefore, unless you have an objective opinion, that's what the Rebbe always said, when it comes to medical things, go to a doctor who's a friend, financial things, go to a businessman who's a friend. When it comes to spiritual things, go to a spiritual person who's a friend. Because ourselves, we're always biased. That's why a person has to have a mashpia. And the harder part is they have to listen to the mashpia. And you see very clearly if it can be a positive thing. I have a brother who's Baruch Hashem. I mentioned him once. He's very successful and he's actually quite calm. So I said to him, Shmuley, how are you so calm? So he says, it says, make for yourself a mashpia and you'll have no doubt. Someone once asked the Rebbe, he said, he wrote a book, 9.5 Mystics, a bit of a researcher. So he said he thinks that Chabad people, like the Song Kranai, they look naive. The Rebbe said they're not naive. They don't have an internal conflict. And it's true that when we were with the Rebbe, and certainly we see it, the more Siddish somebody is, there's no questions of what is right, what is wrong. There's no internal conflict. The Rebbe says a lot of anxiety comes from where your inner value system and your outer behavior are not matching. So how are you going to feel? If you're not doing what you yourself think you should do, you can't feel very good about it. So this kind of idea of having the mashpia and literally giving, again, it relates to what we were saying before, it's about humility. Having the humility to say, okay, my mashpia knows better than me. He knows I don't know. Once you get to that idea, you're free. Because as long as you're holding on to the ego that I have to know and I have to be right, or at least I want to know, then you're still stuck in exile in a way, because you're stuck that it has to make sense, and it's almost impossible. There's just too much information. But once you can get out of that and say, okay, well, nobody can know. It's impossible for anybody to know. It's impossible for a person to beat their Yetzer Hara. But if I use Hashem's system, then and only then I can beat my Yetzer Hara. So then I'm in. I want to beat my Yetzer Hara.